And I don't even think we were good until the second iteration. Like those guys, you know.
And if I'm snapping
Jeff
at
gets
you,
mad at you. If you probably,
you've crossed the line when I snap at somebody on air.
How long have you guys been doing the show, the SiriusXM show together? And was there anything before the radio?
Well, we first started doing radio in 2005 on MLB Network Radio. And I would do like Monday through Thursday, and Chris would do the Friday show.
I don't remember. I don't even remember. I thought we split it initially, and then I got fired. And then I started doing the late show. Like we were doing with that guy, Phil Wood.
I did it like, I thought I did it like Monday through Thursday. But
I thought I did it every other day, but I remember you missing a show because you got stuck in traffic and you got in big trouble and you were like trying to zip into.
So that was like the first week of the show, and they had us going to the studio in the Valley, and I never take that route. I had no idea how long it took. I like, and this is pre Google Maps being like pretty precision on how long it take. Now I'm an idiot. I should have planned to be there an hour before the show. I was still a young, dumb 30-something at the time.
No, you and I, it's so funny how we remembered everything. Now, you missed one on the way into the office. We used to do it in that translucent, whatever, that room with the French doors.
Oh, did I do it twice?
You missed it in the office, and I remember.
Oh, you're right.
So I remember. I remember. Yeah, you missed one that day. We were in the office. Yeah. But also, I'm not sure why I didn't just do it instead. I don't remember. It was weird. Like, when we were, maybe it was Fridays for me. Maybe you're right. My recollection. But it was just such a crazy thing. We were basically paired up with this guy, Phil Wood, who he was all right. He was kind of dismissive of fantasy. He was kind of like, I'm an old school experienced radio guy. Who are these fantasy nerds? So he's sort of a dick, but he wasn't that bad.
I liked him better than you did.
Yeah.
And I thought he was very he just didn't understand it and was trying to learn fantasy, but he had his long held opinions about baseball. And if those two cross swords, then he was dismissive, of course. I probably has something to do with our personalities. My guess that you're a little bit more combative than I am. Agreed?
I mean, I wouldn't say combative. I would say I definitely, I probably, if you mean I challenged him on some of his completely wrong views. Yes, I did.
Yes, you're combative. Yes, thank you.
So no. If he says I wouldn't be combative if he, was saying stuff that made sense. But the thing is that it wasn't just that though. I remember we had some interviews. I remember one time we interviewed Harmon Killebrew, and when we were in Vegas, and I don't know if you were on that one. I think you might have been. We were at the poolside at one of the hotels, and he just didn't let us even say a word to Harmon Killebrew. He just dominated the interview. And I just thought he was very just full of, okay, let me take this here because I'm a professional. You guys are a bunch of nerds. I thought he was kind of dismissive.
I remember that too.
Yeah, it wasn't just that, he didn't understand the sabermetrics. I thought there was actually he was almost looking down at okay, well, I'm stuck with these idiots, and so he was, he wasn't a terrible guy. I mean, he was fine to talk with. I didn't really dislike him, but that was our first.
We were raw. I mean, we hadn't hosted radio before, so there was some mentoring that was needed. And as far as that goes, handling the ins and outs, things like that, I learned a lot from him. I thought he was good, but then they cut that cord pretty quick. Pretty quickly.
What year was this, by the way, guys? What year?
2005, maybe. By the end of that first season, it was just us hosting the show without a co-host more often than not.
I don't remember when they got rid of him, but I guess it was pretty soon. I don't think we learned from him, Jeff. I think we were raw. You're right. I just think we got better because we did it more, and I don't even think we were good until the second iteration. I think we were still raw, but we got a little bit of experience just doing it.
We were way too reliant on callers then too. But keep in mind, solo hosting a show without really the experience of just being able to monologue for a long time. If I had it, we'd have guests and they were fine, but we didn't have enough of them. And it's much easier. A dialogue's much more interesting to listen to than a monologue.
how did you find your own voice in radio?
You just get more confident. We shared this office space with like 4 other companies. And so whenever like the FedEx guy would come, he would leave the package and, you know, with whoever was there. And we were like the first, you know, desks, like right when you go inside the door, we just take the package, sign for it, drop it on the desk of the company where, and it was like, you know, there were these glass doors and you could see in. And as I said, like we shared an office space with like 4 other companies, and whenever FedEx or UPS would come, we would sign usually because we were the first desk like that they would see when they came in the door, and then we put it on whoever's desk. And if we weren't there, someone would sign for us. So I guess those FedEx guys got used to that. And so I'm hosting the show in this little conference room that has these French doors that you can see through. And he starts knocking on the door, and I'm waving away like, go, go, go. Come on, I'm trying to host. I got the headset on, whatever. He doesn't know what I'm doing. He just wants me to sign something. But I'm trying to do the show with this guy, like, you know, distracting me, and I'm screwing it up badly. I'm like, and I'm trying to like pretend to the audience like nothing's going on. At the same time, I'm getting totally off my point by trying to get rid of this guy. And it ruined the segment, you know? And so what I learned later when the dude tried to bust into my studio, you know, and I threatened to drop him, or I said I should have dropped him, but I was like, dude, he was like, oh, this is my studio. And I turned around and I was like, dude, I'm on the show right now. I'm on the air. You're being annoying. Like, you're interrupting a show. There's a live show going on. I should have said that to the FedEx guy. I'd be like, dude, FedEx guy, I told you 5 times, leave me alone. I'm on the show. That would have been good radio, but I didn't have the confidence to just roll with that distraction. I thought I had to pretend. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, it's at some point you just realize like not faking it is always the right way. Like, don't pretend. Just be yourself. I'm having a conversation with Jeff. Jeff's a friend of mine. Jeff and I are arguing about or discussing, you know, some football disagreement we have, which we might do like, you know, 20 years ago at a bar over a beer, and then that's who you are, right? So that's it. That was sort of what happened for me.
Some of our best moments are when you're interrupted, for sure. The New York studio, like just Oscar coming in, or you yelling at your kid or your wife, you know, lots of those. There's
longtime fans of the show always point to the contrast in styles of the two of your personalities, which is really what makes the show what it is. When did you embrace the contrast rather than fade away from it? Jeff, let me ask you that first.
Like yesterday? No. You know, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years. No, it was probably even longer than that. But no, I mean, I just think you get used to each other. You start to kind of pick up on each other's beats a little bit more. I'd say by the time we launched SiriusXM Fantasy, we had already had plenty of experience together. We had done like the night show that Chris had done a lot together. We had done a number of shows on the MLB Network together. Probably shortly after they launched the fantasy channel, I think we were probably pretty good. People might argue otherwise, but I think we, when you start doing a show together every day, it happens pretty quick. And especially when, we've been in business together at that point for over 10 years. I think that made it pretty easy to kind of just pick up on each other's beats. When
you guys found out you were going to be on satellite radio, I mean, you're going back into pre-2010. It was first XM. Was that a big deal?
It was a big deal. I thought it was a big deal. You know, when I started doing any radio in like 2001 or 2, and I still do the show, this Iowa show in Cedar Rapids, just because, you know, those are the first guys that put me on the radio. I was nervous. I was like, oh, wow, I'm talking on the radio. Like, there's people listening in their cars. This is kind of a big deal. And then when we got this national show, it was like a really big deal, you know, and yeah, I think I was pretty nervous about that. And even, you know, in this, even getting back on the SiriusXM one, you know, that was kind of a big deal to get it back.
So they flew me out to DC when they were going to launch the channel. See, they just launched the baseball channel in 2005. I had been doing radio, like, you know, local radio hits here and there. About the same time Chris started, 2001, 2002. I was really raw those first couple months, but I never hosted. They put me, they flew me out. I met with Kevin Kennedy and like flew out together. We, although he was in first class, I was in coach, but we met together in the airport. And then they took us in the same like car into their studios and put us up in a hotel separately, fortunately. But Kevin was really nice, by the way. And Rob Dibble was super nice, but I'm meeting all these people. I'm like, wow, this is kind of big time. And you see it, took us on a tour through their studio. They had a big launch party, and I was the smallest speck on their talent roster. It was pretty interesting. Well, so then they're having a party, and there's like one beer left on the trying to, oh, this is for the talent. I was totally joking, and someone's like, yeah, and trying to put, and then the guy tried, one of the producers like, yeah, but there's a lot more other talent here. Like, I know, I was joking. It's like, I know my place here. In other words, but it's like, no, he wanted to make sure I knew my place. It was still pretty funny.
Who do you think the listener was, and who do you think the listener is? Describe who you guys are broadcasting to over the last 10, 12 years.
But I think like the people that stuck with us, I like to think so at least, and I always did the show as though this were the case, were actually like pretty smart and like you kind of knew what was up.
Yeah, I think the people are thirsty for fantasy content too. Back then, it was hard to find, especially in like when we were on the baseball channel. I mean, they were like a whole show dedicated to fantasy. And then Corey Schwartz and Mike Ciano were doing the thing on the 411 right about the same time. They started up maybe a little bit later, but it was basically that's if you wanted on-air content, especially a whole show dedicated to it, where they'd actually take your questions. That was pretty wild. And then when we started on the fantasy channel, I think it was a little bit different too, because then it was more football oriented. It was football, Sirius and XM, and it was run by Sirius guys, which were football guys. So that kind of changed things a little bit there. But yeah, it's definitely people that have the means to actually have satellite radio. It's also, you have to really want fantasy content usually to listen to a whole show. One of the things I think that Chris in particular is good at is broadening that out, because some of our best segments had nothing to do with like the basics of fantasy. It was just whatever whatever is on his mind that day. Yeah. And that's where we got like silly little concepts from though too. Whether it was like, guess the lines or, and just little phrases like tip the king or things like that. All started from rants and things like that, where we just go off on something. And sometimes it was related to fantasy, sometimes related to football. Sometimes it was just whatever struck his mind that day. And those are the best segments. Those are fun.
So Jeff, Liss's dust-ups with management have been well documented, public. Mm-hmm. What made you stick by him?
They're not all public. There's some of them.
No, there's more. Yeah.
Most of them public. But what made you stick with him, even when the cards were stacked against him at times?
Well, we're friends. I think that's the thing you start with. Friends and business partners too. I have to be on Team Liss because that's Team RotoWire. That's Team me. But also, it's just he was right. I think that was the biggest thing. There almost all these dust-ups, Chris was right. There might have been one time where I saw the other side, but geez, you got to back your guy's play. And it wasn't even a play. It was just an argument usually. And he was right. So usually I go along because I agreed.
Liss, you have anything to add to that?
I appreciate that. And it's true. I mean, I was definitely, rocking the boat a little bit. And Jeff never, was never like, hey man, don't say that or don't do this. It was always like,
as if I could, but
well, no, but you could have made it hard for me. You could have made it a lot harder for me if you were like, and one of the things I said about leaving RotoWire was, we got into disagreements, Pete and I especially, but nobody ever did anything like, oh, go behind your back and like, oh, I know this is a problem, to like Matt Deutsch or one of the guys, I was in an argument with about what we should be doing. Nobody ever did anything like that. In fact, it was the opposite. I was allowed to say what I wanted. I was basically allowed to be myself. Nobody tried to rein that in, And so, I was lucky because, you know what the corporate environment is now. Everybody's always, telling people what they can and can't say. And I just got very lucky that I had guys like Jeff and Pete. And even if it wasn't their style or their personality to be, ranting or fighting with management about stuff or, they never stopped me from doing it. And I'll say, like, there were times, just the basic one that probably people know, but like, we're supposed to take a lot of calls all the time. That's what the show was supposed to be. And we fought that because it was stupid, because we basically were turning over the production of our show to a bunch of randos that, it's great for them and they're psyched to get their call on and their question answered. But for everybody else, it was terrible radio. It was stuff that was irrelevant for everybody else. And we just hated it. We just thought it was dumb. But there was this model in place from like terrestrial radio where that was the way to go. And it was the way to show. It was also a metric to show how many listeners you had. And it was poison on the air. It was just terrible. And so we fought that, and it was hilarious because about 6 or 7 years ago, Jeff and we had to go in. I thought it was remedial training for recalcitrant hosts, but actually everybody had to do it. It was sort of a meeting with these like marketing guys from XM that they hired. and they started going over like what they had done their tests on and what worked and what didn't. And they're like, calls don't work. You need to generate the content. Right. And I looked over at Matt Deutsch, who was in the room. I was like, dude, please. Thank you. And he was like, okay. He was actually not that bad.
I'll say this about Deutsch. Deutsch, we tangled with him a lot, but he actually listened to us a lot too. And we know from previous experience.
By the way, we're talking about Matt Deutsch, former
program director for SiriusXM. Yes.
Yeah, and he just recently left SiriusXM.
He's doing his own thing now. Yeah, he's starting his own channel.
You guys should support. But Matt, we may have tangled with him a lot. He may have had some really silly ideas at times. But you know what? We know from previous experience with other program directors, you can get a lot worse. He
wasn't the worst. No, he wasn't the worst.
He was pretty good. Matt listened to us. We fought, but then he'd listen. Sometimes he wouldn't listen. I'm bitter still that we lost a couple of producers that we love, and Ivy and Trevor. There was other stuff going on than just the direction of our show that caused this. But at the same time, we loved Ivy. We loved Trevor, our producers.
Why did you lose them? Why did you? Why were they let go?
A lot of stuff dealing with that they had to deal with, like on their side of things there at SiriusXM. I don't want to dive into that too much because that's their laundry to air, right? But point is, it was a dark day when they let go of Trevor. It was a dark day when they let go of Ivy. We trusted them. We built the show with them. They listened to us. They had our backs. So when we fought with management, they were on our side. That probably did not help their cause, I'm guessing, but it helped our cause. We really like them.
Yeah, I'm going to say a little bit more. I don't want to get Jeff in trouble, but it's these people aren't here. None of them are there. Deutsch is gone, and so are Trevor and Ivy. My understanding was Trevor really backed us up on some of this, on sort of challenging some of the calls, and I think he paid a price. First, he got moved off our show, and then eventually let go. But not that he's doing, I think, pretty well now, so I don't think it's like the worst thing in the world that happened to him, and maybe he wasn't suited for that long term anyway. But I do think that I'm not going to not say that because I couldn't say that for a long time. It was we were working. It was a horrible thing for us. Like, it was our friends and our producers that we really liked working with, and they just kind of got rid of them. Different times. Ivy was a couple years later, but that was definitely something I was not happy about. But Jeff's also right. Matt had his positives too. And he was good at sort of marketing the channel and growing support for it. And I think he worked really hard at it. I don't begrudge the guy. I mean, I hope he does well in his next endeavor. I really don't. I mean, he's not a bad guy. But I think I just want to say that because I feel like that's true, and there's no reason not to say it right now.
I agree.
They got fired, and that was fucked up. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, that was their livelihood. Whatever. They're young and they have other things, and maybe in the end they weren't suited for it. But I felt like it was sort of my fault. I was the one challenging them. Trevor had my back, and I think it would have been more seismic to fire me because our show was established, because it was RotoWire. There's a lot of connections, and it was easy to fire him. And I think that I felt bad about that. And I mean, obviously he's a grown man and he made his own choice, but I thought that was wrong. Jeff's right though. When I got fired the first time, those guys were douchebags.
What year was that?
2006 or something. We started in 2005.
So pre-fantasy sports channel.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't remember the guys. I honestly don't remember the guy's name. Matt and another guy.
Fishman. It's Chuck Dickman and Matt Fishman.
Chuck Dickman, Matt Fishman. Those are the guys.
What a perfect name for a guy.
Chuck. Chuck was the guy that was the.
I don't know who did what, but all I know was that they used to kind of like critique us all the time, saying you guys are boring, you're too nerdy. And I had Joe Sheehan on, and we were having a conversation. We made a bet. It was like a $50 bet on Andrew Jones hitting 50 home runs or whatever. And my producer at the time was like, "Oh, you can't talk gambling on the show," which is hilarious because the last 5 years have been more gambling. But they acted not just like, "Oh, just try not to do that. It's no big deal." But we just trying to. It was like I did something gravely wrong, And then I kind of cursed out my producer. I don't know if I cursed him out, but I was like, "Dude, what the hell is your problem? Like, you're constantly saying we're too boring. I make a fun bet. Oh, now this is the end of the world." And so then that alone, that was it. That was what got me fired. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I'm going to get those motherfuckers back. Like, can I say that on this? Maybe I'm going to get those out. I'm going to get those out.
You could say whatever you want.
Well, they fired me. You know, that was a big deal for me, and they were railing about how boring we were, and I made a bet, and they acted like I did something horrible, and I complained about it, and they just canned me. They weren't like, listen, we don't like gambling. It was like there was not like a warning or like you've been. It wasn't like I did it 8 times. I did it once, and then when they tried to like lay into me about it, I was like, okay, well, you know, I'm trying to do something fun. And I remember thinking about those guys and thinking, I'm going to get those guys. I'm going to get those guys. And it turned out that, you know, when Sirius bought XM, those guys, I think they disappeared mostly anyway. And I never got my chance to get them. So I didn't even know their names anymore. I'd forgotten them. But thanks, Jeff, for attaching a name back to that. But that was unjust, and those guys, you know. I want to say it because I never got to say it. You know, people screw you over like 10 years ago, and you forget and you move on. And you're like, okay, I'm doing fine. I don't care. But them, you know, that was like Weasley, and you deserve to be called out for firing people that shouldn't have been fired and misusing your power in that way. And good. I'm glad I have a venue to say something. That's actually good. I'd forgotten about that.
I thought Matt though was one of the ones that brought you back on the other channel though. So I don't have an axe to grind with Matt.
No. Oh, did he bring? He might have brought me back on the other channel, which was this. Nobody listened to it, but I loved my producer, this guy Stephen Gregory. I don't know where he is now.
He was great.
But he was a nice guy. And I liked Mike Shields, was one of my producers from the old show. A good guy also.
I loved our producers.
Yeah.
With one notable exception. One notable exception.
Well, I won't throw him under the bus. I won't punch down. No, like that guy.
I agree.
Well, what did he do? What did this producer do?
Big time.
He would be like, he'd be like, oh, Jeff and Liss are talking gambling and like report us. So not only get fired for gambling, I'm like the guy picking pockets when the guy's getting hanged for picking pockets in the square, you know, but basically they fired me for that. But then like we would, you know, move in some gambling talk in the new iteration. And it wasn't as like, oh, that's a sin. It was just a little frowned upon. So he would like rat out to Deutsch. He'd rat us out behind our backs. And I'll give Deutsch credit here. He actually got rid of this guy instead of us when we got into it. And that when I saw him doing that, I was like, that's it. I'm not working with that guy. I'm not working with a guy who's like a, you know, North Korean minder who's going to like, you know, he's not on our side. All of our producers have been on our side, you know, Draws and Ivy and Trevor.
Well, he made it about him. He wanted to be on air more. He was trying to tell us questions to ask, and he got mad when we went asked. That was the final straw. When you and Dalton were doing a show and they had Ricky Henderson on the show, and he got so mad that Liss and Dalton wouldn't ask this stupid question of his because he was going to use that as the cut to promote was his question. You know how they take a cut from our show every once in a while, and he wanted to make it about him. And then there was another time, and it's like, and I said, get that stuff off. You know, he made some sort of like mindless, like sports media comment that we always push against. Like, get that stuff off my show. And he goes, our show. And I go, no, it's RotoWire Fantasy Sports Today, not RotoWire Fantasy Sports Today and X. Yeah. And he goes, oh. And that was funny. Yeah, no, because I'm the one snapping. And if I'm snapping
Jeff gets mad at you. If you probably,
you've crossed the line when I snap at somebody on air. Yeah. I mean, this was on air, and I chastised him for that. It was too much. But anyway.
It was bad. It was bad. Yeah. But we're not going to name this guy. But the point is, and then, you know, I thought the final straw was when he went and like ratted us out, you know. And again, to Deutsch's credit, he knew who to side with in this case. But but it was like, I can't have this guy, you know. Producers have got to they have a tough job because they've got to manage difficult hosts like me who are fighting management, and they still work for management. So it's a hard job.
Yeah.
But if you can't, as a producer, at least like be on the side of your host enough so that they trust you, you're bad at the job. So it's not an easy job always, but it's, you know, that was the only one that I thought was really bad. Everybody else did a pretty good job.
I like our producers. I like our current ones.
I think current ones are good too. Yeah. Bennett and give him a
and
credit.
Brian Drozda is awesome.
Brian Drozda, they're both good.
Yep.
Yeah. So both of you over the years, you have this amazing platform. You're building your fan following on SiriusXM and through all your other different media appearances. I'm sure you have people pitching you ideas and how they could be on the show. That's a perfect segue from what you just said. Hey, I'll start with Jeff. How do you fend off all of these, let's say, people that want to ride the coattails and just want to take from you? How do you deal with that?
It doesn't happen as much as you think. First of all, maybe they go above us. They go directly to XM, but you know, people know, like, you know, we're not going to be your infomercial. Every once in a while, we get a deal like that. Shannon will come in with Shannon McEwen, our ad guy, will come in with an idea, and we're like, okay, well, as long as it's not an infomercial and actually providing content, we'll bring them on, sure. But for the most part, I don't find that much interference from that way. I don't, people want to be guests on our show. We usually have a lot of the same guests. We don't really vary it a whole lot. But I don't really have to deal with that too much. Do you, Chris?
Not much. Mike Masato's always asking me, but I don't feel bad about saying no to him. We let him
Mike
on
Masato?
sometimes.
Give us context.
Mike the Mouth.
Mike the Mouth. He's a character in the NFBC, and he's a good guy. But he just always, he'll ask. He hasn't asked in a while, but he used to ask a lot, and I would basically ignore him or get him on every now and then. But not too many people ask. You're right, Jeff. That infomercial thing comes up because we have an ad sales department, and the XM property is really valuable. But I think Shannon's always been respectful. And Pete too, not pushing it down our throats. And I think that it's good because when you do infomercials, you make a little more money, but you hurt the integrity of the brand, and then the listener, it's not worth as much. And so I'm always like, how much are they paying? No, that's not enough. If it were like enough, we would get the guy on. And we used to do it a little bit more, but I think especially me, I got in my older age, I just would be like, no, absolutely not. And that was fine. Nobody really took it beyond that.
You mentioned your reoccurring guests. Let's talk about each of them briefly. Okay, let's start with Scott Pianowski.
My history of the RotoWire goes back to the late 90s. They needed, I think, a Vancouver Canucks beat writer.
What do you think that the unique value that Jeff and Chris gave to the audience?
I think it really helps that they have different styles. They both are not afraid to get silly, to be funny. They play off each other well. You never know who's going to have chemistry with other people, and you just have to try. And sometimes pairings don't work. Sometimes a pitcher and catcher works, and if Steve Carlton for whatever reason wanted to throw to Tim McCarver, some duos just work, and it's a lot of times it's because of a contrast in styles. But the primary part of the show, I think the reason why it's successful is because they're both smart. I mean, I think they both have law degrees. And Jeff used to joke that he thought he gave more utility to the world by doing roto than practicing law. That was his contribution to society. So,
well, Scott's been working for us even longer than Chris was working on Roto News back in the day. Scott was one of the OG beat writers for us, so we've known Scott forever. The idea of making a codifying, making a weekly thing happened probably pretty early on the SiriusXM fantasy side. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few guys that you just knew we would get on.
Yeah,
and I'm also lazy, so I don't. Jeff, if you look at the RotoWire podcast, right? I had Dalton on every week for Real Man. Jeff would talk to different people all the time. So part of it's because I don't love meeting new people. I mean, I like to know people kind of slowly, and then once I know them, I like to have them on. But I don't like to meet new people, especially on the air. It's not my style. But there were guys I knew well and I knew were smart, and Scott was one of them. And I knew could talk about sports in an articulate, entertaining way. So he was an easy one. There were just a bunch of guys like that we knew. And I didn't, if you look, we don't vary the guests that much. I mean, it's like the same guys for like a whole decade is pretty much the same guys.
Well, especially, and Scott's so thoughtful and very pensive and just really entertaining at the same time. Every once in a while you get that little pause and you're like, oh, Scott, you still there? No, he was just thinking about his answer. And it's because he puts a lot into it. He cares what he says. He doesn't just come off the cuff that often.
Yeah, I pretty much just wing it.
He's a smart guy. He's entertaining, and he'll do every sport. That's one of the things I love about Scott is, if like the Olympics are on and there's like fantasy water polo, he'd probably have a take.
I know one thing I love about those guys is we love talking about theory, right? I mean, the idea is the goal isn't to give the fish away; it's to teach the person how to fish, right? To teach somebody how to play. And that's what we're trying to do with these things. We're trying to get you to make better decisions, whether it's a fab pickup or what closer you draft or who you should bet on or whatever it is. We're just trying to help you with your process, make you prepared and educated so you make a more informed decision and hopefully be a little bit entertaining along the way. I think that's the goal, and that's why that show has lasted as long as it has.
Jeff, then talk about your business relationship with the NFFC and how Greg and Tom became guests.
I met Greg Ambrosius in 1998.
I can't remember the first time I met those guys.
Year after we launched Roto News, John Hunt profiled us in Baseball Weekly like 3 or 4 times. And every time he did, our traffic would blow up.
I kind of remember now the first time I met RotoWire, and it was the labor auction. John Hunt brought in new people for the very first time.
And then he invited us to Labor, the first ever expert league for baseball. So Pete and I went down to Florida. And Greg was one of the first. He was a longstanding member of the league. He was one. That's the League of Alternative Baseball Reality. It's the OG expert league in our industry for baseball.
They were in expert leagues that we would host at the trade conference. So I remember Liss, he stood out, that's for sure. And Jeff is astute as could be. So love those guys at RotoWire and have had a great relationship for more than 2 decades with them. He came up to us, oh, Mr. Ambrosius is on her. And I'm like, get out of here. Who are these nerds that came here, So I don't know why Jeff doesn't call me Mr. Ambrosius to this day. I mean, where did I transform into Greg when I was always Mr. Ambrosius?
How long have you been a regular caller, a regular guest on the RotoWire show on SiriusXM?
So we partnered with RotoWire in 2013. We had the online championship. It was just the NFBC online championship, NFFC online championship. I had a good relationship with Peter Shanky, and I said, we could create this contest and we'll call it yours. We'll take care of it all. We'll guarantee the prize money and all. Of course, it was a great marriage, right? They could promote it for us. We could name it for them. And so 2013 was when we did the deal together. And part of it included that we would have occasional appearances on their radio show on SiriusXM. We had our own show as well, but getting appearances on their show helped us as well. So we started appearing every Monday. Tom and me would alternate, and it just was great. And Jeff and Chris have really gotten into the high stakes in NFBC and NFFC. This isn't just lip service from them. They play the game. They're very good at the game. They enjoy talking about the game, so they like having us on there. I enjoy those appearances on Mondays all the time. They're just fun to shoot the with, if you will, and I just really love it.
What do you think makes Jeff and Chris's show stand out from the rest?
Well, they're very genuine, right? They're opinionated. Chris is opinionated. He sticks to his opinion. That helps an awful lot. There's a lot of people who take 2 sides on the radio, not Chris. And Jeff and Chris just bounce off each other very well, but they're genuine. They're very knowledgeable. They're opinionated. That's what you want in a radio show, right? And I think these guys hit that to the max. They're just very good. But what a good chemistry. I mean, you talk about Mike and Mike, right? They tried to have other people work with those 2 guys. It didn't work out. I'm sure Jeff will be fine with whoever he's with. Chris, whoever he's with, Dalton, he does a great job. But those 2 guys together are just like the Mike and Mike. They just kind of work together very, very well, and they're a pleasure to listen to. I just think they're a perfect yin and yang, and they just work real well together. Gonna miss them for sure working together, but I have a feeling they'll get back together somehow.
Greg was one of the very first people we met there, and he was super welcoming. He's like, hey, you guys are doing a great job with Roto News. It's good to get younger guys. We were the young guys. Yeah, blow your mind with that one there. I was 27. No, 26 even. And we're like, damn, we're doing labor. This is awesome. And Greg is a nice guy. Keith Law was there. He was really nice to me. I got to be pretty good friends with Keith too. But Greg was like, this is awesome. I love what you're doing. It's different than everybody else is doing, and that's going to grow the industry. And he was great. And he was doing Krause magazines at the time. That was before NFFC and NFBC more. And NFBC was before NFFC, if I recall correctly. But after a few years, when they broke away from Krause and they did NFBC, and that was something he's doing on the side. It wasn't his full-time gig. He invited us in, and I forget how it first came, but we had him on the show, and it promoted it, and obviously it helped him, and a lot of his players listened to the show, and so it's just a natural relationship. So I met he and Tom though way early in the game, especially Greg. And we've known Greg forever. So I don't know when it first officially became like a thing on the show, but it was way early in the relationship.
Greg, he's just a good guy. Like Greg is just a hilarious guy. Like he's just a nice dude. He's easy to talk to.
In one word, describe Chris Liss.
Different.
And he's just one of those guys that, when you do business with him, and we're partners with the NFFC, NFBC, it's a win-win. He's just one of those guys that there's nothing shady. He's always paid the money. There was another one that folded where they still owe Dalton money for finishing in the top 10 overall. Never got the money. They absconded with the funds. Greg's operation is good. He's a really good business guy, and he's just an honest, good-hearted guy. So that's all I'll say about him.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Dalton Del Don is a recurring guest on the show. How long has he been on the show? What year did he start making regular appearances?
Well, so Dalton started writing for us, I want to say like 2005, 2006. He was one of my guys that I, liked a lot. And he and I would drive to Labor to do the Labor draft in Arizona. We have some crazy stories about that. So I think he was probably one of the regulars pretty quickly early on too.
How did you first meet Jeff and Chris, and how did you get integrated into their SiriusXM show?
All right, man. I cold emailed about 2005-ish, just looking for any work, a bunch of different companies, and RotoWire got back to me, and happened to have the San Francisco Giants team beat. Liss and I hit it off. We are both sick-minded individuals, and we have a lot more in common than I'd like to admit. But yeah, I did some more football stuff, and that was what he was mostly with, and then baseball with Jeff. And eventually that led to me I don't know if you know this, Alan, but I was co-hosting this XM show 3 days a week, 3 hours long with them right before Yahoo came calling. So, I actually was really like, oh man, right when I have this cool XM thing, I don't even think I've been doing it a year. I had to give it up because obviously my dream job was going to Yahoo. My very first show, I'll never forget this. The first show, they're like, okay, in 3 minutes, you were interviewing Roy Halladay. He was like in his prime. He was like, I was like, oh, is that all? He was like just won the Cy Youngs or whatever. So that was my first interview. And then there's memorable moments in Vegas. During the Vegas trip, they still wanted us to do the show. So we're like scrambling in the morning, hungover, interviewing Ricky Henderson with the producer yelling in our ear to ask a question that neither Liss and I wanted to. Some epic times with the show and the RotoWire guys.
Describe Chris Liss in one word.
Sick-minded. There's props to Jeff. Yes, man, it's been a long time, and that's going to be like a marriage breaking up. It's going to be really weird not being able to hear them talk sports throughout the year and daily.
What's your pre-show prep?
Oh, there's zero prep, zero prep. And I love it that introducing me to the show, they usually use the clip. We talk to some of the best fantasy minds in the industry, and then it leads to me and Liss says, and also Dalton Del Don. So I was on the way to a bachelor party in a bus full of people, and he's like, no, we're still doing the segment. So I called in a bus full of people, really loud, riled up, going to Reno. That was funny, but the best has to be in LA. We came back from Labor, and Liss is like, it'd be a funny gig, because he had a show at night one of these times, and sent me on a liquor run, and I went to a liquor store and purchased us a 6-pack of beer live on the air. Yeah, man, I love both of you. I wish both of you the best of luck, but honestly, selfishly, I'm just upset. I'm gonna miss my routine and miss listening to you, Liss, every day, and yeah, man, you will be missed. I'll still, of course, listen to Jeff.
Stephania Bell, she obviously has a unique skill set in assessing injuries. How long has she been on the show?
So Stephania, she was I just met her at one of those like FSWA conferences when it used to be called that. It's got to be like 2005, something like that. And she she was like, hey, I'm a physical therapist and I'm into fantasy sports and whatever. And she was writing for a competitor's site. I can't remember what it was called, but KFFL. That's right. It was a pretty big site. And Jeff has good memory. Like
amazing recall. Yeah, amazing recall.
Well, they used to call him the human scoreboard in softball. So
still do. They call me scoreboard.
Yeah, okay.
We still play.
So,
it's crazy.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So KFFL, she was writing for, but they kind of gave her like a co-byline with somebody else, and they just didn't, they were just sort of like, oh, here's this person who wants to write. And they just kind of like considered it like, one of many people who probably wanted to get into fantasy sports. But I don't know. I don't know what it was. Like she made a little bit of an impression. And I said, okay, well, send me some stuff. And I was like, this person's actually knows what the hell she's talking about, And right. Will Carroll had been out, doing this a little bit. He was the only other guy who kind of specialized in injuries. But, Stephania was a physical therapist. Like she worked with people who had these exact problems that these athletes have. And she had like firsthand knowledge of how rehabs work and how long it takes and all this stuff. And she was just really professional. That was the thing about her is like, if you asked her to do something, she would do it and she would do it well. And if you gave her feedback, she'd take the feedback and incorporate it and write it better. And it was really easy to get her going. And then we got her on the air and she was comfortable and she was pretty, confident and could speak articulately about this stuff. And it was like, wow. And, it was like, she was just really good. So that was easy.
How does Jeff make you a better broadcaster?
I think he gets our joke, right? Like there's like this joke that we have, which is kind of like, we're just, we're doing the show, right? And like, I know it's funny because you used to listen to the show as a listener and you think like this is a big deal, like this show, right? But like Jeff and I
still do, by the way. I still listen to the show. So it's not like I used to listen to it.
Well, I mean, but like, it's like, oh, what a big deal it is. And now you're on the inside, you've done the show. So you know kind of how the sausage is made. But Jeff and I, you know, I mean, they started Roto News before I got on, but, you know, we knew, you know, Jeff knew that we were like hustling our asses off in 2002 for no money. I mean, like no money, like taking half paychecks. And it was just us like making projections and rankings and, you know, cobbling together the site and some beat writers. And, you know, so now we're on this show, but like, we're still like, it's a joke, you know, it's not serious. Like the show, we're not like professional broadcasters with a radio voice, you know, it's like a joke, you know. And so Jeff and I are both in on the same joke. And so I think that's, you know, and then he knows how I am, you know, and then he'll play the straight man, you know, and I'll be the clowning guy. And it's just a good balance. It's just a really good balance. He gets the joke that I'm trying to make. And sometimes I'll miss one of his jokes. And then someone will tell me later, I'll be like, damn it, I missed the joke. It was a good joke. And I totally missed it because I was being too serious. I was being too whatever.
You just power right through it, man. You do it.
Sometimes I do.
Great.
Sometimes I do. Yeah. I hate this comp that I'm about to make because I despise the guy, but he's the Dan Patrick and I'm the Olbermann, you know, and I can't stand Olbermann. I hope I don't become that. Jesus Christ. But there's always like the straight man, you know, and you know, the guy who clowns on everything. And that's the balance that you have.
Jeff, how does Chris make you a better broadcaster?
He challenges me all the time, constantly. You know, I can't say any random throwaway thing without it getting challenged. I can't make an assertion and just it'll just, oh, okay, sure. No, I have to think, you know, I have to make sure I'm on guard because if I make this like throwaway comment, he's going to be on it. And also, he gets everything real quickly, conceptually. You know, we'll play like the best ball 10. We're learning, you know, I played a best ball game and he figured out, okay, this is the constant game. He gets things really quickly. And so it keeps me challenged all the time. And I like that. And I you know, it's, you know, it could be dull. It could be this drudgery to do the same thing constantly for 10 years, but it's not. It's always fresh. It's always new because I'm always, you know, I always have to be on guard, and that's a good thing.
Is that intimidating? Does that make you bite your tongue sometime? Or, you know, maybe now you're a little bit more free flowing with your thoughts, but at some point, did that make you say, maybe I shouldn't say this? Maybe,
but it makes me a better broadcaster, though, if I am thinking about it a little bit more. So it prevents me from getting lazy. It prevents me from being on autopilot. No one wants to listen to anybody on autopilot anyhow. So it makes it a better show.
Hey, Jeff, Liss is leaving the show.
Yeah, I know. It sucks.
What does this guy mean to you? What's, you know, obviously the show will go on, you know, it'll be different. There'll be parts that, you know, opportunities to do things, but what are you going to miss most about doing the show with him every day?
A lot of things. I mean, we get each other's sense of humor. You know, you talk to someone for every day for 10 years, pretty much. I talk to Liss probably more than anybody else besides my own family, which is just kind of crazy.
How are you still sane? How are you still able to function?
I know, right? You know, but who knows? Maybe I'll just blossom after this.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, my life is so good. It's so easy.
Wow, Jeff, you really have a voice. Wow, who knew? Yeah. It's no longer the Chris Liss show. Oh, and hey, Jeff's there too. No, just kidding. I'll say this. We're better positioned now than we've ever been. Like the guys that would fill in here and there, they're smooth now. And it's not even fill in. Like Clay and James, they rock. Todd Zola is now a really smoother, more confident radio guy. Football side, Mario is, you know, definitely built up his audience. Joe is, you know, natural. It's kind of a smooth, natural radio voice anyhow. Not afraid to state an opinion. We've got a deeper lineup than we ever had in the past. So that's going to make things a little bit easier in the transition, but it is going to be different. I mean, when all the jokes that I'm going to make, like, you know, there's little one-liners that mean something to Chris and I and to the audience, but it's not going to mean, I'm going to start saying that and they're going to be, okay, whatever. You know, and it's just like, you know, don't diminish the work that Chris is doing on the show, that sort of stuff. Right. So that doesn't mean anything to these guys yet, but we'll have our own. I'm
going to ask.
Let me say one more thing about Jeff. I don't like to say nice things about people, so this is a rare thing. But I'll say one thing about Jeff is the dude is super smart. Like, I don't mean just like, I'm not just saying that. I wouldn't say that. Like the dude is super smart. Like he's not the guy clowning and making all the philosophical points and always going into all this like projections, philosophy and all that shit. But he gets it. Everything I say, he gets completely, like immediately. And, I've thought about this for a long time, and I've thought it over for, a couple of years, or at least, I've been mulling it over all day if I thought of something new. And, I've been having to like clarify it, but he gets it. We go on and he gets it, and he'll respond intelligently and say, well, what about this? Or, oh, I agree with that, but what do you think of this? And I appreciate that. That's, I don't think, there's a lot of people that can just pick up like high level concepts that you've been thinking about or working on for a while live on air and be able to actually, digest that and process that and understand it right away. So anyway, I just give him a little bit of his due. So, well,
thank you much. Appreciate that. But that's the thing is, and I'll throw it right back at you, is that you, like I said, you pick up concepts super quickly. You get introduced to a new game and you're like, okay, bam, I see this flaw. Bam, I see that. And you're also super well read. I mean, obviously all the philosophical bent that you majored in college, it stuck with you, and you've known how to apply it a lot of times. Whether it's like the guy falling out of the tower, falling off
the Bertrand Russell
inductive Russell quote. I use that all the time. I love that one. It applies a lot in our industry.
I agree with what he said. Like it's similar. It's like I talk to Jeff more than anybody else except my family, and it's just like it's also the producers a little bit, but it's like a little bit of a work family. We don't go to the office anymore, right? We used to have an office, which was great at RotoWire. I mean, that's a whole other story, playing foosball and making Josh Ross miss his haircut appointment and like, and like people sweating and shoe punching the foosball table when he would lose. And the whole thing, it was like, we had a whole culture there. We had a whole thing, and it was like, it was something to do every day. And, you'd roll in whenever you felt like it. But you had your friends there, you had your colleagues there. And, now that everybody's remote, we don't have that. And so our radio show, with Jeff and the producers, it's kind of this friendly thing. And the guests that come on, and it's like they join in, here and there. And now I'm just like in Portugal, friggin', by myself. And I'm going to have Dalton, on, and I'm sure I'll get Jeff or I'll do guest spots or whatever. But I'm going to miss, I think, having that, that like sort of, daytime family that, that you have. And we'll see, I don't know. I won't miss like having it always be by appointment at these hours. I won't miss not being able to go to the beach, rent a beach house because there's not 30 megabytes up and down. And I've tested 5 times. So it won't hit me until, it's been a month and I haven't done it. And I'm like, shit, like that's just not my life anymore. So, and it's been, 12 years. So I think it will hit me pretty hard. I think probably.
Some of the signature bits, will they go on, Jeff? Are you still going to do chances to win? Are you still going to do guess the lines? I mean,
I will definitely do guess the lines. Chances to win, I don't want to be the guy doing chances to win. If I can get somebody else to do the chances to win, and I'll be the host guy again, we'll probably do that. But I don't know. I mean, can't do everything. Yeah, but if we're gonna have engagement Monday, I mean that's an easy segment, and XM's gonna want it because they know they get like 1 billion calls that segment. So I don't know
who owns the rights to that list. I mean, do you have that?
The only rights I own is
the answer to that.
Yeah, the only rights I own is Real Man Wood. I got that. Everything else they can take, and I won't be doing chances to win or any version of it.
We have made it clear chances to win is free use, and in fact, we demand other people use chances to win.
Yeah, that's fact. Yeah, that's right.
So the algorithm is public use.
Anyone can access the algorithm. It is. I don't know if they can replicate it though. There's a lot that went into it. It was.
It's a lot to understand.
Once I incorporated quantum computing into it, then I think that it's sort of out of reach for most nation states. There's definitely people who don't get the joke. There's definitely people who say, you're such a jerk, man. How are you so mean to the callers? Or chance, this is a stupid thing, chances to win. You're just making these numbers up. God damn it, you're making these numbers up. Can't people see? It's fake. Yeah, it's fake. That's the whole point of this segment, you idiot.
Hey, guys, you've both been generous with your time. I've been listening since pretty close to the beginning. I would say I picked it up around 2012. I haven't missed a show since. The show means so much to so many people. and it's hard to believe for myself and all the fans that it's coming to an end in this iteration. Obviously, we're looking forward to the next version of it, the 2.0. Wish you both best of luck, and we're just happy that I think this look behind the curtain, as you said, to have the sausage made, is going to mean a lot to a lot of people. So thank you both for taking the time to do it.
No problem. And we'll have Chris on a lot, but only for chances to win. So it's a double-edged sword.
No, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. No, maybe I'll just do some reads for like candy bars and stuff. I'll come on, be the guest reader. That's what I'll do.
Right. Man, I'm glad.
And hey, Alan, thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. It's nice of you. I was probably going to just like disappear, promote my site a couple times or something, but I appreciate that you're a long-term fan of it and you get the show, and it's nice that you care enough to do the segments at the end of each year, which were great, and that you're putting this together. So thanks for that. Everyone agrees with what we say on the show, Alan. I can't even imagine maybe someone disagreeing with us. How much were the Super Bowl tickets, Jeff? How much you spent on the Super Bowl tickets?
Everybody is wondering that, just so you know.
How much they sent you back?
Everybody's wondering, huh?